All right, we're back with Beau on Country Pocket. We're talking about his album Bonfires of the Soul, and you just heard Motherland, which I think the two of us are going to perhaps form a more strong agreement on this one. Marina Avsyannikova, the woman who held up a poster denouncing the war in Ukraine on a Russian national newscast. Um, Tell me what you think of her.
Oh, I mean, incredibly courageous. I mean, you have to say. I mean, the interesting thing was that I really thought when that happened, I thought that she would be eliminated one way or another, accidentally fall out of a top window or something like that. As it turns out, in the end, I mean, she did get prosecuted, but she's still there, which I find quite surprising. But that isn't for the Putin regime. That isn't really the norm. Um, Incredibly brave, incredibly principled. I mean, the guts it takes to do. I don't know if you've been to any or visited any particular repressive regimes, but
I was
you
in
know,
Russia in 2011.
when I was.
I saw some really interesting things, and I was even lucky enough to be given a tour of a news network there.
Uh-huh.
And they quite openly said when we asked, like, if Putin doesn't like the story, will you run it? They quite openly were like, no, of course not,
Yeah,
as if it was the most normal thing.
yeah. I was in Moscow in the Brezhnev days, Brezhnev and Podgorny. It was a frightening place to be, and particularly when you came from the West. I mean, culture shock isn't the word, but I mean, looking at the way in which that lady particularly um, reacted and demonstrated, I think it was an incredibly courageous thing to do. I'm glad that she's still alive. I very much doubt that she's in any particular senior position of any kind, but nevertheless, at least she did survive. But so many haven't. So many have not. And yeah, I mean, the song is just simply there to. I very rarely, truthfully, I very rarely write about. Uh, oh, come on, I'm sorry, I'm going to wind back. Since I was a kid, I have loved current affairs. I'm a bit of a news junkie. I'm certainly a current affairs junkie. And almost all of my songs, if they're not written about sort of historical things or whatever, they're written about or inspired by current affairs. But I rarely actually write about specific items because that's what the newspaperman does. That's what the reporter does, and that dies very very quickly. It's tomorrow's newspaper is a fish and chip paper. What I tend to do is take principles and then work around those. So if we're talking about things like my truth, I'm not going to talk about. I want to talk about Meghan Markle, as I said. I'm not going to talk about that in the song. I'm going to talk about the principle of my truth, which is done ironically. In this particular case, I did write about the specific because she was so unique in the way in which she was prepared to put literally everything, and by that I mean her health, probably her life, possibly on the line. She was unique. So in that case, it was worth doing it for that purpose. But most of the stuff that I do is inspired by current affairs or history. Um, but is non-specific when I come to write about it. I write around the principles. So somebody once, in a review of my stuff, said that I tend to be like the guy that walks around behind the horse with the shovel, and that's what I do. I pick up what the horse left, and that's what I deal with. But I don't deal with the horse itself. I just deal with the fallout from it, and then I write around that. And I think I forget who it was that said it, but yeah, I thought that's not a bad description.
You're probably the first person I've ever heard pleased with a review that compared them to a person scooping up horse manure. I'll give you that. I like the way, in particular on Motherland, you framed what she did as a patriotic act. Here she is going square against, quote unquote, the Russian government, the man who supposedly represents 80 something percent of the Russian people. But her dissent there, I don't believe that he actually represents 80% of the
No.
people, but that's the figures being presented there. Um, for her to do that, to go up against a government that may very well have majority support, why do you see that as such a patriotic thing? Because I totally agree with you.
I'll tell you why, actually. I mean, first of all, come back to the 87% and may indeed have support. When you've got a captive media, when you've got the media, as you've said, you talk to the guys in the newsroom and they say, no, we won't publish anything that Putin didn't like. When you have that sort of attitude that pervades, then the only thing that people are going to get, whether it comes through radio, TV, newspapers, internet, or whatever, the only thing they're going to get is one side of the story. So consequently, somebody who is actually working in the media does actually see the other side of it. They know what they can't say, but they do see the other side of it. Now, Marina, in this case, she could see the other side, but she wasn't allowed to say it. But she did. And that's where the courage comes in. And that is where the patriotism comes in. Because when people have only got the one side to look at, then the situation is that they can't actually form any sort of real value opinion. I mean, Kim Jong-un had 99%. It's unbelievable. I mean, can you believe that? That 99% of the people in North Korea are real devotees of Kim Jong-un.
I
Yeah.
would believe that 99% of the people believe it would be vital to their survival
Ha
to
ha
say
ha.
they are a real devotee of Kim Jong-un, but that is that sarcasm you speak of.
Yeah, but that's it. And that's it. This is exactly the point. And this, again, I'm sorry, but I'm coming back to the free speech and everything else. This is why it is so important that people are not squashed, that opinions that run contra to what the Twitterati say are not squashed and crushed, and people are not abandoned and are not forbidden. Like I've said, Robert Winston, just one, I hadn't thought of him in a long time, but Robert Winston on Question Time. I mean, this guy is an absolute authority, but because the what he was expressing went against the conventional thinking at the time, completely forbidden. Now, what he did was nowhere near comparable to what Marina did on the Russian state TV, because she literally was putting her life and her health. I mean, she could have been in the gulag. I mean, it could have happened to her what happened to Navalny and all of that. She was she was being fantastically brave, and so for that reason, I thought it was worthwhile making a song that specified that rather than just the principle.
So, on a very related note, what do you think of some of the laws regarding free speech that we're seeing in our countries? Um, we have we have some pretty interesting ones going on, including in the UK, people supporting a certain pro-Palestinian group being charged with terrorism without necessarily doing anything other than holding up a poster.
Mm.
I find that to be I find that to be perhaps not on the level of what if there should even be a penalty for it, which personally I think a poster just falls under the category of free speech. But even if there is to be a penalty for it, I would say terrorism might be a bit too strong. And You also have you have in and this is another interesting one in the United States. At the moment, Donald Trump is suggesting that there could be a variety of government consequences against news organizations that use government resources like a broadcast network. They could be denied access to broadcast if they go against him too strongly. So I see both of our countries, which God knows they're not perfect, but um, versus the world, versus the grand sweep of history, I think we have to admit we have it pretty damn good. But are you concerned when you see sorts of behavior like that?
Yeah. I mean, I am. I mean, talking about the Trump thing and the media controlling the state, I think it's absolutely vital, probably goes from what I've said earlier, that the media maintains its independence, but I mean genuine independence. I mean, when you obviously in this country, the Guardian, the Mirror, Indie to a degree. I mean, these move to the left, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, Express to the right, and everybody knows that. So, and you might say, well, that's polarization in exactly the same way as the sort of echo chamber on social media. Not really. You make a decision to buy that. You don't get it fed to you by an algorithm. But I just think it's so important that media is free to express its own opinion. And I think if people are being threatened, then they should stand up against it. I mean, this really is why so many media bosses take such huge salaries. It is there to be courageous, to put themselves on the line when it is necessary. If you go back to the Washington Post case with Watergate, for example, when Catherine, you'll tell me her name, can't remember, the proprietor of the Washington Post, when she really put her backing behind the guys, the reporters, that was guts. I mean, that was what the media is supposed to do, not to
Catherine
kowtow.
Graham.
Catherine Grant, thank you, Catherine Grant. But when they stood up and did the job, that is what they're paid to do. And if they get threatened for it, they've got to stand up against that as well. In this country, I I do tend to think that we are getting to the stage now, which we're not supposed to do here, where the broadcast media is becoming noticeably polarized. And I'm see my difficulty. I'm not. I love and I always have loved current affairs and politics. I have never been party political. I vote and I always have voted how I think would be best at the time for the country. That's always been my principle. And I've had people come to it's happened not while we've been at this house, but in the last place we were about 3 or 4 times. And I've had that question put to me on the doorstep, can I rely on your vote? No, nobody can rely on my vote. I don't care whether you're Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Reform, Communist, I couldn't care a much. The point is you can't rely on my vote at all and never have been able to, which is why, generally speaking, I'm not too popular with political people because they like to hear they like to hear you're going to be on their side, but I'm not. I tend I want independence. I want real people to talk to me, tell me what they intend to do, and then I'll make up my own mind as to whether I'm going to follow them. But I'm not going to follow them because I've got a blue or a red or a yellow or a turquoise rosette.
Yeah, I certainly respect that. I feel like you and I might be on a little bit different ends of the left-right spectrum, but we certainly have our, libertarian civics down in the same foundation.
I don't,
So
I don't, sorry, just to say, I don't consider myself left or right. I mean, I mean, the spectrum that I've voted over so many years. Um, I mean, some things that I believe quite strongly. I suppose you could say are left wing. Some are right. But I'm not aligned. I've never been a member of a party in my life. I'm not a joiner of things anyway. But I just, when it comes down to writing, as I say, I follow with the shovel. I write what's on the shovel.
So the last question I want to ask, now I know with the media we get into some really tricky things. For example, the BBC might actually have a duty to represent everyone in a way that the Guardian may not, right?
It should have, yeah.
Being government owned and whatnot. Um, the one thing I want to close out on, I'm sure you've given it quite a bit of thought. What would you do, if anything, to change the state of social media? What would you do? I think we both agree that banning children is not necessarily the answer, but you've identified some major unhealthy aspects there. What would you do, if anything, to try to rein that in a little bit?
I think it's a, as I say, unfortunately, the genie's out of the bottle, so you can't put it back in again. I think, as you've said, there are some very, very major players with very major interests in keeping the status quo as it is now going. I think you've got to come at it from and regulation. I'm not sure I would. Not because I don't think we should, but because I just don't think it'll work. I think that there are a lot of very clever people around who will find ways around pretty well anything. I think I would prefer to come across, I sort of mentioned it earlier, I tend to come across it from the other side and try, in terms of education, if we're going into schools, to get people to be genuinely discriminating in their own minds as to what they're watching, um, and what they're being told, and what propaganda they are actually receiving, to understand what algorithms do. That if they click on this, they're going to get fed more and more of it, and therefore try to understand, and this applies to adults as well, and try to understand that what you're getting isn't the real world. It's actually a reflection and then a magnification of what you yourself are interested in, or are compelled by, or are committed to. So I think the important thing would be to try to get people to understand that they can be discriminating about what they see, and the attitudes that they take to the social media that they're interacting with, whether it's Insta or whether it is Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp or whatever. Be discriminating consciously rather than just accepting that, aha, that's what it's showing me, therefore that's the truth.
Yeah, I think if I were to want to do anything to change the state of social media beyond those like exception sort of things where, you have like Elon Musk, supporting what his beliefs are in the algorithm.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say, I would say if there were to be one regulation I'd make, it would be making it mandatory for social media companies to offer users choices regarding their algorithm. Just so someone who is educated and wants to kind of ease the effects of said algorithm on themselves, it should be something that they would be allowed to, or not just be allowed to, but to have the right to get in and play with, whether that means, checking a box that says, I want to receive more just the facts sort of information in my feed, whether it means, and some social media companies offer this already, but make it mandatory that, they could hide certain topics if you feel as though you don't want those to be.
I mean, yeah, you can filter now, can't you?
Yeah, I would say just if you're going to have something as addictive as those algorithms, I would say the only thing would be to give people the right to, yeah, I guess weaken the process and still participate.
I think in an ideal world, you're probably right. But the difficulty is the ideal world isn't there. I think that people who have vested interests would be able to circumvent any attempt to allow the sort of liberalism that you're wanting from the point of view of the receiver of the information that we get on social media. I think it's a great aspiration, but I just don't think it will work. I think in the end, I think the only thing that can change the way in which social media affects people is to get to the people themselves and make them more discriminating. In that way, and it's a hell of a thing because I think the teaching profession has got a lot of problems as well. But it is one of those it's one of those things that might, in the long term, make the difference between whether people are adversely or positively affected by social media.
Well, God help teachers, man.
Yes, yes.
All right, Bo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you ever so much for the invite because it's been good to talk to you. It really has, Trevor. Thank you.